All right. Hi. Hi, everybody. Hi, Andy. Hi, Julia. Today, we're going to have a little conversation or big conversation, depending which way we're going to go. And interviewing Julia Tallering here and getting to know about her and her business in astrology and the wisdom that she shares with others out there. So before we begin, you want to say hi, Julia?
Hi, everybody. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to us. And also, Carolina and Andrea, thank you also for taking time out of your day as well.
Yeah.
Sure. I was
Yeah,
excited for
yeah.
this hour. I have a lot of questions for you.
Can't wait.
Good old intense Andy here has prepared, done her duty of homework, and I love it.
Yeah,
So do you want to start with your first question? Is yours pretty broad?
sure. Well,
Yeah.
Julia, let's just get right to it. How long have you been an astrologer?
I would say since 2020, I was learning more about it when I had a lot of things happen in my life that were very difficult. So I was learning a lot about it. And then I started doing, birth charts and everything. And then I really started charging for it.
Mhm.
That's
And
awesome.
what kind of astrologer are you?
So I do Western. I look at the Placides too. That's the kind of that's the type. And I do the natal charts, and I also like to do solar returns. Those are my two favorites.
Okay. So have you studied evolutionary astrology or I guess you say you're modern, so do you consider yourself like a psychological astrologer or any other?
No, I don't consider myself a psychological one, but I will mention I consider myself to be very intuitive. So what that means is I'll break it down for you. When I'm sitting with a client, this happens all the time. When I'm sitting with a client, when I'm looking at something that's challenging in their life, based on the transits, based on what I'm seeing, the aspects, I kind of look at it and I'm like, all right, let me see how I can make this a little bit easier on them. Because when I see squares and when I see aspects that are like red, meaning like they're, difficult, that's not something I like to tell a client, hey, this is going to be really, really hard for you, so just deal with it. I like to say, okay, you know what? I'm noticing that there's this going on with this, and my intuition is saying to deal with it this way. So I use my intuition specifically for that reason, because one, it comes from, I channel it, it comes from source. So it's really information that I feel like would help my clients. And I've had clients that I've had to do that for, and they've really appreciated that wisdom.
Mhm. So, no, Caroline, if you want to bust in with a question, by all means. I mean, I'm just kind of a interrogate.
I guess I think for me, when I talk to people who are passionate about astrology and want to share that wisdom with others, I like to hear about the origin story and the motivation that created that instance for you. Like I actually haven't heard Andy's full story of when she first read her birth chart, but it sounded like you were early on from your family exposure. Is that right, Andy?
Oh yeah, I mean, this isn't interviews not be about me, but yeah, like I started reading my own chart at the age of 23. I just had a girlfriend who was like, "Will you get obsessed with astrology?" Because I have kind of obsessive mind. But anyway, um,
No, but it's interesting to see like what that orange and like was it a transit for you that sparked this interest, right? Um where were you in that moment of life that pushed you towards that side?
Yeah, I can go into it. It's kind of a long story, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. So first of all, I was in grad school at the time, and I was studying counseling. So, I was doing that at the time, and I liked what I was doing, but I also didn't feel very strongly about it, and I also was going through some health challenges. And I also realized that I'm an empath. And I realized that I have like certain gifts, if you will, like intuitive gifts that um I noticed because I would look up, why am I feeling this way? Why is this happening? And it kind of started like that. Like, for example, I would go to a grocery store, and for anybody who's an empath, you feel the energy of other people. So I started with that. I literally can feel someone's upsetness, anger, all of that in my system. So it started with looking that stuff up. Then it went to, okay, let me look up, anything about myself that I can really get my hands on. So I really started doing that. Then it went into like researching more about it. And I was like, okay. So when I did more of the natal stuff, that was when I was in between Massachusetts and then I moved to California. So basically, when I was in California, I was still in my master's degree, but it was a different program. And when I was living there, I got really into doing this stuff because it was the only thing that made me feel alive. It was the only thing that I felt happy with. And that was a time when I suffered a lot of health issues. I'm not afraid to say it. I have autoimmune issues. So I went that literally when you have that going on and you are still working on treatments for that, that's not an easy thing to go through. So I had to really figure out more of who I am and if I can really continue on the counseling path. And that was really hard for me to figure out. And it's something that I really, really had to figure out myself. And I realized for my natal chart, when I looked at it, because I wanted to see more of who I am, I have Aquarius in my 10th house. So it makes sense that I like this stuff. It's unconventional, it's stuff ahead of its time. It makes sense. I have Cancer in my 2nd house. So when I really try to help people, that's, I think, why I use the intuitive part of me, because I want to be able to be caring towards people who are having a hard time. Cancer is also in my 3rd house. So I'm very, very nurturing when I talk with people. I'm very caring in how I try to make money with the income. And I also know I have Scorpio in my 6th house. So whenever, usually during the day, when I'm doing something, whatever it is, I usually experience some type of huge transformation. So when I realized all that in my chart, I was like, okay, that's why I feel this way. I feel very different from most people. I don't feel like I'm meant to do the normal, like 40 hours a week. I feel like I need to do something different. So, and I still like helping people. That's in my chart. Aquarius likes to be able to help others, but I wanted to do it in more of an unconventional way when I started doing astrology.
Are you a Gemini rising?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I did. I was getting some technical drops there, Carol. All right. So what are your sun, moon, and rising?
So Taurus sun and Scorpio moon and Gemini rising.
Oh, interesting. So your Taurus sun's in the 12th house and then your moon's in the 6th house. Okay, interesting. I'm a Gemini rising with Sun and Mercury in the 6th house in Scorpio. And, I write the occult texts that you might even be reading someday. But we have a very similar imprint. I think Gemini Scorpio does really well with astrology because astrology is actually a talking healing art where the Gemini comes in, it's like what we aren't doing hands-on healing. We're actually shifting people's energy bodies with our mental framework. And I feel like the Scorpio part could be doing the qigong of like moving people's energy around and like fixing and transforming things. And so like having a Gemini Scorpio mix is probably really good for what you are doing.
Yeah.
How do you tap into source when you say that? How do you do that?
So this is something that's very individualized. It's not something that I really teach. Usually whenever the best way I can describe it is whenever I'm looking at a chart, I'll normally get a feeling or like something that I'll hear, and it will be like, okay, so I'll be like, well, this is a challenge, and then I'll get something like either something in my stomach will be like, okay, if I get a stomach ache, I know it's going to be a challenge for them, and then I'm like, okay, so how do I handle this? And then if I feel something that's like, okay, pull back, like that's not a good thing for them to deal with all that. If I feel pulling back, I'll tell them, okay, you know what? Let's not go crazy with this. Let's like pull back. So if you need to pull back on something, like if you're having a challenging transit, just pull back on it, wait on it. Don't worry about that right now. So I like to do it for that. The only time I have like a big tug of war with it is when I see Mars in a certain house and I'm like, and it's like a challenging transit and I'm like, okay, but how do I kind of go back and forth with how I explain that because Mars is a very action oriented planet. So I'm very much like, okay, how do I deal with this? But then usually that's when I get a sense of, okay, you know what? Maybe they should wait a little bit to do it, or they should do it this way, that type of thing. Does that kind of make sense a little bit?
Yeah. So it sounds like your intuition is you don't necessarily get visions or hear a spirit talking to you, but you get like a clairsentience of like knowing in your physical body. You know, it's like you get messages in the physical body of like, yes, no, go this way, more of this kind of
I
thing.
get both. I get all of it. It kind of, the reason why I didn't want to mention that part is because it kind of depends on the situation. I don't always get spirit talking to me. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't. It really depends. It depends on the situation. It depends on what somebody needs to hear. And the thing that I also like to mention is if I'm not supposed to tell somebody about something, I don't, because it interferes with their lifespan. Because I used to do readings, so it interferes with their path, and I wouldn't want to do that. I've had to do a reading for somebody in the past, for example, and they asked me a certain question, and I was told you can't tell them this answer, and I'm like, okay. And they begged me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't tell you. And I knew what the answer would be. I knew it was going to be a certain answer. And I said, you know what? It interferes with your life. And I don't want to do that because I know this is something you really want. And then I find out 6 months later through social media that I was right. And I'm thinking, thank God I didn't tell them because it would have interfered. So
Interesting. Wow, that sounds like a really kind of heavy I don't want to call it a burden to bear, but it sounds like you got a lot going on over there, you know?
I have a lot of gifts, I would say. It's just, it doesn't always, how do I put this? I got into astrology specifically because I like the scientific part of it, the Aquarius part, but I also like being able to interpret it. You should see me before I do a natal chart session. I always look at it and I'm like, ooh. And then with the solar return, I look at it and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So I kind of get all into it. And I usually prepare, I would say 30 minutes, not before, but I usually spend a good 30 minutes looking at somebody's chart to see if I'm missing anything.
Hmm. Yeah, it is kind of fun to prep charts. I mean, well, not even kind of fun. It's like super fun. Like when you go into the inquiry and then you're like looking and you're just like, oh, look at that. Like it's super fun. Carolina, do you have a question?
Oh, I think Carolina, you're on mute.
Oh, there I am. Okay. I think I was going to ask you about like, so you discovered astrology, you started using it for yourself, and now you share that. So tell us more about your business. Like, what's your day-to-day look like?
So when somebody wants to work with me, it's usually through referrals now. So I really enjoy that, and it's because somebody trusts me enough to refer them to me. So usually what I do is I look at a chart like way before the session, and we book it and everything, and then I'm able to kind of see, what it is that they're going to be going through. It depends on what it is. So if it's a natal chart, I like to use the natal chart for different things. First of all, there's a lot of information in there about how to make money. And I always say that because there is. If you look at the second, sixth, and 10th house, that's all about your career, making money, day-to-day stuff, and how you make your income. So I like to look at that stuff. And then I also really like the natal charts. And the reason I like it is because it helps you understand yourself. It can give you a lot of input into how you interact in the world, how other people see you. I really like that stuff. So when I work with clients, I like to be able to be like, hey, you like this because of this. And there's a lot of people, I've literally asked almost every single person, if not every client I've had, does this make sense to you? Does this resonate? Is this how this works in your daily life? They're like, yeah, you basically described me. That's exactly how things will work for me. And I'm like, okay, glad to know. I'm glad to know that. It's not surprising to me, but I ask them so that I'm on target with what they think. And I also want to make sure that I'm not missing anything, but I'm pretty comprehensive in how I do it. So I really like that. I also like doing solar returns because I am huge because of what happened to me. I had so many things happen in my life around, like before I had my Saturn return, basically everything that could go wrong did go wrong. So before I had that happen, I wanted to know, okay, what's going to happen? What's going to happen here? Like every month, can I have some type of intuition about what's going to happen? Because I can't handle any more bad stuff happening, basically. So when I look at solar returns, I like to look at it from that example of, okay, how can I best prepare this person so that they can deal with the transits, all of this stuff happening, the aspects. I like to specifically look at the aspects. I don't go too much into transits. I really go into aspects of, hey, this is aspecting this, and then they usually ask me what that means, and then I go over, okay, this is going to be half astrology, half practical. I don't believe in just doing astrology. I believe in doing both because you need to be able to use it every day and need to be able to know every year what you're going to be looking at. So a lot of the time, I kind of also see, does this client know a lot about astrology? Some of the clients that I've had, they know a little bit about it. Some of them have used AI to figure it out, so they know about it. Some of them don't. So if it's someone that tells me, please dumb this down all the way for me, I will do that. I likely won't even go into the aspects. I'll just tell you this is challenging, this is good. That's kind of how I put it, because people need to have it more dumbed down if they don't know everything about it. So I like that part. I like being able to go into this is a good thing. And I also really like, and this is something that I feel very passionate about, I like knowing how to effectively deal with your energy every day. So if for example, if you have a lot going on in your 10th house, I'm going to tell you, hey, direct most of your energy towards that house this year. And if you have a lot going on in your 3rd house, I'll say, hey, any speaking opportunities you have, take them if it's all positive stuff. Anything like that, marketing, take it. Anything to do with publishing, writing, take it, stuff like that. So I really like preparing people for anything to do with the year ahead. So I think that should help to understand that a little bit too.
How long is a reading for you?
Usually it's about 40 minutes, but I spend about, like, if somebody wants, I usually book it for an hour. That's how long it usually is. But I noticed that people need the 20 minutes for questions and everything. So I usually like to do it that way too.
I see. Well, what do you like about being an astrologer?
I like being able to know kind of more about the person. So like I said, if it's a natal chart, I like being able to understand them. So I like being able to know, hey, this is how we can connect. This is something that I feel good that we can connect on. It makes me feel alive. With the solar return stuff, I really like knowing what's going to happen next because it kind of helps with putting energy in the right place. Because I'm a projector with human design too. So I'm more about how do we direct our energy in a way that's helpful to you, and so that you don't feel like you're wasting your time doing a bunch of stuff that the planets aren't in, they don't feel as favorable or is not favorable for you this year.
Mhm. So how do you think astrology works? Like, how can a solar return chart like really make things happen in the year?
Well, like I'm kind of talking about with solar returns, I feel like it depends on where the planets are placed in your chart. If the planets are placed in a favorable area, aspecting a favorable area, that's a positive thing for you. I feel like that can really help. Also, I don't do this during like my sessions, but it's something I was considering. I think it's also really helpful to know about transits every year and how the transits affect you weekly. I think that that's something important too. That part I don't do yet. It's something I was considering though. I like being able to know that stuff for, just for everybody's knowledge. It's something that I feel like would be really helpful. For example, right now, we're going through Saturn retrograde. We're also going through Neptune retrograde. Those things are really important for the masses to know about. Saturn retrograde is all about looking back and seeing, hey, do we need to fix this in order to deal with a better foundation for ourselves? Neptune retrograde, do we really have the same wishes and dreams that we had before, or are we changing them? So those things are really important to review so that you know whether or not you want to continue on the road that you're on or if you want to change something up. That's the stuff I really like to deal with.
Nice. Carolina, do you have anything?
I remember having this discussion a long time ago early on of trying to understand, like, if we're speaking transits, natal, solar returns, perfections, all the things, like what's the timing? So like when you're looking at the transits, are you talking to people really? I'm of the belief that weekly is not necessarily good at times. Like I've been obsessed with astrology in the past. So I'm like, oh, wait a second, I need to take a deep breath here. Like,
I so disagree with that. I think that would be like,
that's
to me, that would be
awesome.
like spending a week not checking the time. It'd be like, I'm not going to look at the time for a week. Like that would actually decrease my functioning. Like as an astrologer, I'm constantly checking the planets. What time is it? That's not an obsession.
No,
That's actually
no.
adhering to time. I just
No,
disagree with
no. My Pisces rising nature says, I don't want that much reality at times. Like, but I get it. I get it. And I think for some people, it's really, really easy and helpful to know that, you know? Um, so how come you focus more on the solar return than like on the transits? Is it more of like, because it's you're very focused on one thing versus several items during the time?
I learned more about the solar returns before I learned about the transits. So that's why I'm more focused on it. But I was thinking about doing the basically I was thinking of doing the transits. I do it now on my Clapper account. I did it before too, but I like doing the idea of knowing what's going to come and everything. I kind of do agree though with the weekly transits. So honestly, I do feel like they're important, but I don't check them myself every week. Only because it's not something that I feel like is completely always necessary. I think it's important to know it. And I do like to try to say it. I do like to try to talk about it in like when I post it on Clapper. I like to do that, but it's not something that I always am doing. And I also found that people really like looking at or and watching videos that are very positive. So if I'm talking about stuff that is like you have basically a whole week of squares, people are going to be really, really tense and really anxious. Or semi squares. I'm like, no, I don't want to mess up your week with that. So I would much prefer talking about here we have a trine, here we have that happening. I would much prefer to talk about that. But I also am the type of person that likes to give reality. Like it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows because this is life. So,
Well, I mean, yeah, I just want everyone who's watching this video to know that that's, I mean, but by not looking, okay, what if you're helping a bipolar client track their moods for the week? Like, I mean, sometimes we need to look at the moon transits in the week because of the inquiry that we're getting. Like, if someone says,
mhm.
what are my manias going to be this week? And you say, oh, I don't look at the moon. I don't look at these weekly trends. I don't know. It just really depends on the inquiry. It's not the point of this video, but I don't want people watching this video to think like it's like all astrologers everywhere think it's too much to look at transits during the week. Like,
No,
It's
I don't think
not.
so at all. I
yeah,
look
It's
at
not.
transits, but you know, it's two different inquiries here. So personal versus individuals, right? Like if the individual that comes to me is like that's what the level of detail they want, sure, you can pay all the money you want for that. But if you're not interested in that, as I was, like I went through that process of going that deep and that detailed and solar, you know, zodiacal releasing, all the things. But there are moments in my life where I'm like, I just need to do and trust that I'm making the best decisions for myself based on how I'm feeling. And then when I'm like, I have an intuition of like, I'm feeling something here. I want to know what's going on. And then I'll check out my app or something, you know? But
Hmm.
yeah, for me personally, I've gone through the waves of a lot and little.
Yeah, I get that too.
yeah.
I think that's something that I agree with you on with like knowing what the transits are. It's funny because when I am going through something difficult, like, whenever it happens, I think this happened like, I don't even know, recently maybe. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on in the sky right now? What's going on? So I literally Googled it and I'm like, oh, that's why I get it now. So, and even my friends, because they know that I do this stuff. So they're like, Julia, what's the transit? What's going on right now? Because this, and this is going on. What's going on? And I'll be like, okay, this is what's going on. They're like, okay, when is that ending? And I'm like, it's ending this day. And they're like, okay, good to know. Thank you. How do I deal with this? This is how you deal with it. Okay, cool. Thank you, God. And like they literally say, God, this is like a nightmare. So, that's for, tough transits, but for good ones, I honestly, I remember telling a friend of mine last year in December, I was like, we got to make the most of January to June because that is when there's barely any retrogrades next year. So make the most of that. Do everything you can in the next 6 months to zoom through everything. Try to do everything you can because after that, we're getting hit with retrogrades. So she was like, okay, good to know. So yeah.
I mean, this is makes me think of how astrologers are writers. We're writing the interest of humanity for the next year. And it's like each of us gets to use these transits to write a story for our clients and our crowd. And I like the story that you're writing, Julia, about you're being positive. You're not being a kind of doom and gloom astrologer. You're
Mm-hmm.
doing what I would call like supportive futuring, is like trying to make a brighter future by use of the
Yeah.
planetary aspects. So it's like, yeah, I think what you're doing seems to be working for your client set, and that's awesome. So let me ask you, what are you on social media platforms, or how do you socialize on the computer or with your crowd, I guess?
So I'm on Clapper right now. I had a YouTube, but I did take it down recently. I'm gonna be starting a new one up. I realized that the location is not the prime location that I wanted, so I have to change everything. I just wasn't getting what I wanted, but I'm on Clapper right now. And I'm in a couple Facebook groups as well. So that kind of helps with the engagement a little bit.
Hmm. And then, well, how do you find client? I guess you said it's just like word of mouth kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's coming through real life people.
Yeah, I get usually it's people that I see in a Facebook group and I usually nurture them over time. And they kind of I feel like people need to see that you know what you're talking about. So sometimes I've nurtured them for a year and then they pay and they want to have their own thing, they want to have the solar return or natal whatever it is. Sometimes it's through a good friend of mine that, knows me very well. Sometimes it's through another friend of mine. So usually it's through that, because I feel like people need to see the value first and they need to see that you know what you're talking about. And they also need to have that trust factor there. So those are the main those are the main ways that I get clients.
Makes me think of the sales cycle. Like in the 7-step sales cycle, there's prospecting, which is figuring out like who's into astrology, who even would want this. But then the second step is building rapport. And I think astrologers often think that people should just find out about their services and then they would buy them right away. But they say in sales that until someone actually feels like you're their friend, they won't even consider buying from you. And that's even like the vacuum salesman. Like that's I know it's weird to talk about sales, but you're kind of talking about selling yourself. Like you have to build trust and let them know that you
Hmm.
know what you're talking about. And yeah, I think that's a really smart thing because that is just the building rapport part of the sales cycle. So that's actually really smart. Um,
Yeah,
so
Yeah,
I enjoy doing that.
there's always a price lever there, right?
Hmm.
$5 versus 100.
That
Like,
too.
I'll give you $5. That's no problem. 100. Wait a second. I need to know you a little bit better.
it I think it's also about like something I had to learn a lot over time is it's also about value. So what you value in yourself. I know I also before I priced my services, I looked at the market rate a lot as well. Like I first priced them as something I felt good about, and then I looked at the market rate and I was like, okay, I'm pricing way too low. So I picked it up because honestly, pricing for service for an astrology chart is anywhere from $100 to $300. So that's the market rate. So I priced it there because I wanted people to realize that I know what I'm talking about, but it's also in market rate. So it's not pricing yourself too low or too high. I do know that someone recently, when I talked to them, and I was a little surprised by this because she's seen me post updates in the Facebook group that we're both in for like I don't know if it's been a year. I don't know how long it was. And I told her how much my services are, and she said, really? And I said, yeah. Why is that? Like, I looked at her like, why is that surprising? She said to me, I thought yours would be 300. And I'm like, really? And she said, I was like, why do you say that? She said to me, because you know what you're talking about. You seem like an expert in the group. And I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that. I just don't feel comfortable charging that much. I feel comfortable charging a certain other amount, which is more than like in the market rate that I mentioned too.
How much do you charge?
150.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Um, all right, what are your goals for the next 6 months?
I want to be able to talk about, you know, this transits and everything, but I also feel like it would be a good idea to mention the transits happening in the actual like the birth charts and all that stuff that I do, really more so in the solar returns. I think that would be helpful. And I also want to lead up to that. I wanted to do more social media work with the stuff that I do, but I also want to make sure that it's being well received by the audience. So doing more stuff with networking with this, all of that would be helpful.
So you're talking about it sounds like you had a YouTube channel, but it wasn't really getting the reception you wanted. So now you've like taken it down and you're gonna start a new like take two, everybody. Like you're gonna do a
Mhm,
take two on your YouTube channel.
mhm. Yeah, it's something I decided to do. One, because I realized that it wasn't like the subscribers were going up and down, so it wasn't really consistent with going up. And the value that I was putting out, I'm very big on putting out value that I want to feel recognized for. And because this is something I'm very good at. So I want to be recognized for the value that I share. Because it takes time for me to make videos and edit and all that. It takes time for that. So I want to be able to do that, but I also had a feeling that my audience isn't in the United States. It's in other countries. So I wanted to expand my reach with that also. So that's another big part of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to expand my reach more and I'm trying to connect with those people because I just have a feeling that it's in that kind of area. It's in the areas that are not in the US. And I felt like it's a good idea to change it up. So that's why I decided to do that. And this kind of would be the start of doing that.
All right. Carolina, you have anything?
No, I think that's great. I'd
Okay.
love
Thank
to
you.
hear more stories of astrology reaching all the masses across the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So who are your dream clients then?
I would say people that are very focused on making sure that they are putting their energy where they should be putting their energy. So, you know, making sure that they are, if they, for example, if they want to know kind of how their solar return is going to look for the next year, that would be a dream client of mine because I would be like, hey, this is how you should deal with the energy in this type of ways for how, you know, the energy is going to be for you. If it's more favorable towards career, I'm going to tell them that. That's a dream client I have. Um, I like being able to also look at the moon stuff. So if somebody wants a natal chart, I could also kind of give them some information about new moons and full moons with respect to their natal chart. Because I talk about that stuff since when we have full moons and new moons, they affect us. And I always mention that whenever we have a full moon or new moon, to look at the sign it's in and to look at where that sign is in that person's natal chart, because that's where they're going to have the new beginning or the ending. So I kind of like to look at that because I feel like that's really important. So somebody who's interested in that stuff and somebody who's interested in how to deal with their energy for the next year and like how to effectively manage it for wherever area of life, I think those would be my dream plans.
Mhm. Interesting. That sounds like your dream inquiry. Like
Yeah,
like
probably.
so your dream client is just anybody who has a certain curiosity. You don't care their age or where they live or you don't.
No, I I always hear to niche more, like really make it niched, but when I really try to make it niche, I always come back to that. I like whenever I try to make it so like niched, it's always back to that. I would say like I would say the only people that wouldn't work for me are people who are like a lot older because they would probably be asking me the entire time if they're gonna live through the next year. and I don't want to give them, you know, any type of hope that, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm talking about somebody who's like 100 years old. That's kind of what I mean.
Mhm.
So
Interesting. Okay,
I'd
so
be curious to see if anybody's actually doing astrology readings at 100 years old. I can tell you my grandmother is not really that concerned. Um,
okay.
she's 102.
Oh boy.
I know. But I would, I want to meet these like centenarians like who are still practicing and curious. There has to be.
Maybe.
I'll be doing it when I'm 100, but I could probably read my own chart. We'll see. All right.
I
So
don't doubt that at all.
yeah. Well, and I really like what you're saying about using the energy because, you know, I focus on astrological remediation and mega manifestation basically. And, you know, what the ancients would say is if you are manifesting, you know, each transit to your chart, you basically don't get sick, you don't get into a state of disease. So that actually keeps people healthy. And then also, I mean, this is a science of energy, of like how to use chi, how to use your forces, a stagnant person gets sick, honestly. And so yeah, I think you're definitely on I like the track that you're on with how you are using astrology. I think it's really impressive. So
Thank you.
I want to know, how did you actually learn the astrology? I know you said that you got curious because you were in a state of disease or whatever, but like what books did you read? Who are your teachers, or like how did you actually learn?
So one of my really good friends' moms, she's like a mom to me. I learned some of it through her, but it wasn't all through her. I did do a lot of classes, but one thing about me, if anybody knows human design, I'm a 1-3 profile. So when I want to learn something, I really research it to heck. Like I literally research a lot, and I will have 20 tabs open on 20 different windows to figure out the answer. That's how researched I am. So I spent money on some courses, but it wasn't a lot. It was maybe 3 courses. And then I learned a lot of self-learning on my own. And then after I did that, I actually looked at my own chart because I didn't want to charge for this yet, even though I got the courses done. I wanted to make sure I understood my own before I can explain it to somebody else. So I did my own self-taught, and then I did a friend of mine self-taught, and I made sure I understood that and I explained it to her. She's also pretty intuitive, so I asked her if I'm right and she said yes. And then I kind of kept doing that with a few people, and then I started charging.
So where were the courses, or like
Udemy.
Udemy?
Mhm.
Never heard of that. So
It's a massive teaching platform.
oh, okay.
But I'm curious though, is there like a teacher, someone in the realm that you have really been drawn to for their work in the past?
There wasn't really a teacher. I've just kind of learned based on whatever it is that the course was teaching me. And I saw on Udemy that there are multiple courses for this, but I also was wondering, why is there multiple courses? Why isn't there just one that has everything? And then I realized it's very advanced stuff. So like one was just teaching about houses, and another one was teaching about how to read aspects. Those are 2 different things. So that's kind of why I picked both, because you can't learn one without the other. You need both. So that's kind of how I did it.
So do you do other things than Astro? Like what are your hobbies, or like what else do you do?
I like numerology. I'm a certified numerologist. That's something I really enjoy. We're in a 4-year, for example, so all about, building or I'm sorry, we're in an 8-year. I keep thinking it's 4 because I'm in a personal 4-year. But no, we're in an 8-year, which is all about business and, business success and all that. So I like numerology. I really enjoy that. Um, I used to do readings. I really liked that too. Those are the things I predominantly like a lot, because it just makes me feel very connected. I'm also a life path 7, so I'm very, very spiritual. It's something where it's a very big part of me, and I honestly didn't know that I was a life path 7 until like literally in grad school. I didn't know any of this.
Hmm.
So that's when everything changed.
You know, we have, similar Scorpio and Gemini, and it's like I had this similar experience of like remembering I was going to go to get a master's in counseling, and I kept thinking, but all I want to do is talk to people about astrology. And I was like, if I was at the counseling program, I'd be like, so anyway, what's your sun, moon, and rising like? I just realized I would never ever be able to contain myself, you know. So I feel like you are a similar character.
Very big on that. I'm so huge on that. Whenever I talk to like somebody new, I'm always thinking, is this your what's your sun, moon? What's your rising? What is all this?
Yeah.
And I feel like the reason that people normally get along with me is because I have a Gemini rising. So I get along with anybody, really, because you know that just comes out. I get along with anybody. You would never think I'm an introvert, but I am.
Hmm.
And it's funny because people literally are like, you're in it, you know, they wonder how I'm an introvert because I don't come across like that, but I am. And a Gemini rising, we talk very fast. We just talk
Well, and I
fast.
think the chart can allow for separate, like the Myers-Briggs in tests like that, they do a clumping of person, like you're an introvert, you're an extrovert, but the chart understands a cyclical human. So the Scorpio moon in you might be kind of introverted, but the Gemini rising might be very extroverted, or your sun in Taurus in the 12th house might be very introverted, but your Gemini rising is extroverted. So like you can actually have both traits in one human and they could be
Mhm.
expressed cyclically. I mean, that's just the astrology option there. So.
Yeah. I also have my Mercury in Aries, so that just fires everything. Like literally, sometimes I'll say something. I didn't even think of it before I said it. And I'm like, okay, that we gotta reel that in. We can't do that all the time.
Oh yeah, Tauruses with their Mercury and Aries are so different than a Taurus with the Mercury and Taurus. Like it's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, Mercury and Aries keeps things lively. So, do you have any astro idols?
Hmm. I don't think I do actually. I think, you know, actually, it's not an Astro idol. This is the only thing I'll say. I like Oprah a lot. I think she's doing a very good job. And it's so funny and the only reason I'm bringing that up is because I happen to research celebrities and famous people that have their 10th house in Aquarius. And I wanted to understand it more, and she does. And I'm like, that's why, because she is so much of a humanitarian. And the more she does with that, it's amazing. So no astro idols, but people who have that, it makes like the 10th house in Aquarius, it just makes so much sense to me. So
Hmm.
I researched her and a few other people. So yeah.
Okay. So, what are you currently manifesting?
Um, hopefully people who appreciate my wisdom, appreciate how I can help them, because I do genuinely want to help people. I want to help them become their best selves. And a part of that is also knowing more about themselves. A big part of that also, we didn't even touch about this, like talk about it, is understanding their North Node. That's a huge part of astrology, understanding what they're learning in this lifetime. I mean, my North Node is in Capricorn and it's also in the eighth house. So this stuff is literally what I'm supposed to be working towards this lifetime too. So yeah, that's a big part of what I would love to, you know, continue doing.
Okay. Well, I have three more questions, Carolina. I don't know if you have thought of anything.
No, I mean you're covering the main ones.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I I'm always curious to hear people's opinions and ideas about things. So, my Venus and Gemini is always curious.
All right. So, Julia, I know that you want to teach. What are you thinking of teaching, or what is your teaching trajectory?
Well, I'd like to teach about how to read natal charts, how to read solar return charts. I think that that would be interesting for people. I like being able to understand how and why people are the way they are. That's a major reason why I went into psychology in the first place. And then I realized that astrology explains that better to me. So I would like to be able to teach that to people so they understand things more. I feel like that would help with decreasing a lot of like violence in the world, stuff like that. That would help with help people understanding people better. I feel like that would really help a lot. When you understand why someone's acting a certain way, it's easier to deal with, I feel like.
Mhm. So, what are your
Yeah.
favorite aspects or transits?
Okay, well, I would say I really like anytime there's a trine, and I'll even say Saturn trining another planet, that's fine. Something that's okay with me. Because it's in a favorable position. So I like that. I like Venus trining Jupiter. Anybody would like that. So those two are, I feel like, are my favorite ones. I also like Neptune, also trining another planet, but I will say this about Neptune. This is something I just remembered something actually. This is something important. I actually started watching when I was learning about astrology. I started watching Astro in Wonderland. She has a YouTube channel. I learned a little bit from her too. She's really good. And I only recommend people who are amazing. The reason that I thought of her is because she mentioned early on when I started watching her that she's like, Neptune is a great planet, but she doesn't like it that much. And I was wondering why. And I was like, why does this girl not like Neptune? It's a great planet. The problem with Neptune is you can get rose-colored glasses on and you don't see the world the way it really is. You don't see reality. You just see beautiful stuff in front of you. And I like that a lot, but you need to also take off the blindfold sometimes and be like, hey, this is what's really going on. How do we deal with it? I think it's the Taurus sun in me. So that's probably why I think of it that way. But no, I really like her. She's not like a celebrity or anything, but she's really, really good at what she does. I think her first name is Ella, actually.
So I have a Venus square Jupiter. Do you not like that aspect?
I don't like squares. I think that they're hard to deal with, but the thing that I like to tell my clapper community specifically about squares is that I think that they're an important transit, and I'll tell you why. You learn the most about yourself during squares. You learn what you're made of, and you learn how to overcome obstacles. That's important.
Well,
I would say that natally, big proponent of squares depending on what they are. And I would love to hear Andy's impression of this, as she's read so many charts, but squares can really bring about huge rewards through work. They're just not depending on, I have a sun moon square, sun square Uranus, Pluto square Venus. I've just learned more. I feel like I've had more of an opportunity to learn about myself through those squares.
yeah, I have 3 squares in my natal chart. I have a sun square Mars, a moon square Neptune, and a Venus square Jupiter. And one of the reasons I watch the moon transits to the hour is because I'm tracking transits to my squares often because they're manias. Like, a square is hard to deal with if you don't know astrological timing. They sit there dormant and then they burst once a week. And if you are like, I don't watch the clock, then it's like you're not in control of your squares. So it's like, I'm actually in control of my squares. I use every square. I mega manifest everything. People are always like, you're so busy. How do you keep up such a crazy schedule? I'm like, I just use the energy of my 3 squares consistently every day, all day for all week long. Like, so I love having squares in my natal chart, but I specialize in astrological remediation. And part of the reason why is I don't have the luxury of not watching my chart in real time because of the squares. Like my sun square Mars could be violent if I wasn't watching it. When Pluto hit it last for 2 or 3 years, I have Mars in Cancer, and I felt that violent energy, and I crocheted and crocheted, but I had to time it to the moon. Here comes the moon triggering. I'm crocheting for 16 hours. Done. It's like I have to run my squares intentionally, and I think if you're looking for a lazy, like I don't have to watch my chart lifestyle, then a trine is better for you. But if you want to be a mega manifested beast of nature, then you want squares. I mean, so that would be my
I
response.
like your answer though, because this is the thing. I like trines, yes, because it's easier energy. And I'll say that I'm fine with admitting it, but I also do believe that you do need to have squares or else you wouldn't learn anything. You would not learn anything about yourself either.
Or you wouldn't, you wouldn't, like a lot of the most successful people in the world. Okay, I'm going to show you some of the things that I made on the Pluto hitting my square. Okay, here's a
Let's see.
hippopotamus in a
Oh,
bathing suit. Okay,
okay.
this is what a square can produce, right? Here's a doll of my daughter. She's a triple sag. She's blonde, really blonde, and this is a doll of her that I made. So it's like this, because of my square and knowing the transit to my square and not wasting a mania ever. I made I made 100 people happy by making dolls of them. And like, you know, and it's funny because Pluto's past that square and I no longer have any desire to make crochet dolls. Like, so it's like, had I not seen and transmuted that square, just the world would be not as good of a place. So I think, yeah, I mean, I prefer squares. I would say I prefer an informed square. You know, when
Mm.
somebody just
Mm-hmm.
has an unlearned version of their chart, a square can beat you up. But
Mm-hmm.
that's why I culturally think astrologers need to go out and teach about bipolarism, because it's like we know more about manias than anybody, but we're not talking about that. And I'm like, why would you waste a life of mania? Like, all the psychologists can say is like, it was just a mania. You thought you could do anything. I don't know what's wrong with you. And it's like the astrologer's saying like, you can do anything right now. Get to it. Come on, I want to see that YouTube channel come out. Like Julia, like I want you to make your YouTube channel on transits to your squares when you're like burning with like chi, basically. Like it's like,
Oh,
you know, so that's, I hope you
no. I like, no, I appreciate that. And that's the thing. I like, I do think that squares are very important, and I'm a very hard worker in general. So I do like having them in certain situations. Yes, I'm like basically an overachiever. The reason that that I really like the trines part though, is because it gives me a little bit of a break from having so many squares when you like, if, for example, if your apartment floods, if you fail a class, if your boyfriend breaks up with you, if you lose your job, that's too many squares happening. So you need a trine. That's what I mean when I say you need something. I'm okay with all of that happening. Cool, fine. But give me a trine so I can deal with all of those squares,
Right.
because that's too many squares to deal with for anybody. All
We
of that
need
is
we
too
need a
many.
bingo like trine, like a trine bingo, like see if
Mm-hmm.
you can get it, you know, the next ball. Oh, a trine. Then the next one saw you get a sextile today.
Yeah. See,
Yeah,
I'm
I wish it
okay.
was like that.
I'm okay with like all of those squares, because actually my life is a lot of that happening, like all of those squares. That's a lot of how my life usually goes. No kidding. But it's easier to deal with all of it when you have one trine. I'll take one trine. I'm good with that. If I have all of that happening, I'll take one trine, because it just makes it a little easier, takes the edge off a tiny bit, and you're like, okay, you know what? I'll deal with it. I'm fine. I'll just hang on to the trine and I'll get through these transits. That's kind of how I look at it, because I think the Capricorn North Node in me always is working on something, is always moving, that's why I think I'm able to deal with those squares, because it's like, let's go through these, let's break through these limitations. And I know all about limitations. Let's break through this. And I'm very big about that. I actually like breaking through limitations. It's a big part of my human design. So I'm very good at it and I like doing it. It's just easier to do it with one try, just one.
Well, I think astrology across the lands like trines. I think it's, you're not crazy for thinking that. I think that's a universally, like, we know we love trines, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so we have 4 minutes. I just want to make sure we get out. How can people contact you to work with?
Um, yes. So people can contact me. I have a Facebook group. And so people can contact me through there. And I will put the Facebook group information in the description box there. I'm also part of Carolina's group, I believe,
Yeah.
still,
Yeah.
and I think I'm
Yep.
also part of Andrea, your circle also. So I like that. I kind of like it that way. And then I also have a Clapper account. It's at Astrologer 411, so I have that too.
Okay, so they can just find you on Facebook at Julia Tallering, basically.
Yeah, that's fine. You can contact me through that way too. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
No,
All
thank
right,
you.
Julia, it was really good to get to know you, and you sound like an awesome resource for people who want a solar return, especially, and
Okay.
to figure out how to, you know, best use their year, which I think is a great inquiry. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was nice talking with both of you too.
yeah.
It's nice talking to
All right.
you. Yeah.
Bye, everyone.